people were coming out onto the streets protesting the elections, but what we've seen is a really brutal crackdown. The UN just put out a fact-finding mission report saying it was the worst crackdown in 25 years. So thousands of people have been detained, hundreds of people have had to go into hiding, and 25 people have been killed, most of them shot dead.
You may not have heard the name Maria Corina Machado previously, but really, really interestingly, she is the Venezuelan opposition leader. She's been in hiding for 50 days since the election on the 28th of July, and she's seen a number of her supporters arrested, killed, her closest political ally fleeing to Madrid. And Christina Lamb, the chief foreign correspondent of the Sunday Times, has been speaking to her.
This is something very strange, because during the last few years has been always sort of surrounded by thousands and thousands of people, people hugging me, touching me, talking to each other. And now I'm absolutely on my own. And Maduro said that I was, fugitive. He referred to me, so I have no doubt that they want to catch me.
Christina Lamb, of course, travels the world as the Sunday Times' chief foreign correspondent, and she carried out that interview. But it had to be, Christina, I understand, by video call, of course, because Maria is in hiding. Tell us more about what she told you and remind us really the context of this, the election on the 20th of July and what happened there.
Sure. So almost 2 months ago was the elections in Venezuela, and after the elections, her party, Vente Venezuela, this time had actually tallied got all the official tallies from most of the polling stations. They had 80% of them, which showed that their candidate had won by a massive majority. Although Maria Corina is the opposition leader, she wasn't actually able to run herself because she was banned by Nicolas Maduro, the president. So she put forward a kind of unknown candidate, really, somebody called Edmundo Gonzalez, who is a retired diplomat. But everybody knows that she's the opposition leader. And she's not even allowed to travel on planes in the country, on buses, people were threatened if they took her. So she was having to go on horseback or tractor or on canoe. But even so, they managed to succeed. They think in this election, most people accept that because they tallied the results so effectively this time. So the European Union this week has accepted her candidate as the president-elect. So has the Spanish Parliament, other countries too, but Nicolas Maduro has said he won the election, and his party, he basically runs Venezuela like a dictatorship. His party's been in power for 25 years. Before him, it was Hugo Chavez, whom people might remember. And so he's basically refused to accept the result, said that he's won without providing any proof, and declared Maria Corina Machado as a terrorist and fugitive, a wanted person. So she's had to go into hiding. And her candidate, Gonzalez, has actually had to flee the country because there were so many threats against him and his family.
I wonder what happens next. Were you saying about the fact that Venezuela is being run like a dictatorship? I wonder, even with the international pressure you mentioned there, whether there is any light at the end of the tunnel and any sense that democracy can prevail here.
It's difficult. I mean, Maria Corina is saying that this time is different to previous times because they can actually prove the fraud, and that she says he knows he's lost. He's only still there because the top brass of the military is still supporting him, but it's a matter of time. This is difficult because we've seen other similar situations. If you look at, for example, Belarus, Lukashenko clearly did not win the last election, but declared himself the winner, and he's still there. So we've seen the same kind of thing happen in Zimbabwe and in other autocracies. So But, there is a sort of international support for her. People were coming out onto the streets protesting the elections, but what we've seen is a really brutal crackdown. The UN just put out a fact-finding mission report saying it was the worst crackdown in 25 years. So thousands of people have been detained. Hundreds of people have had to go into hiding, and 25 people have been killed, most of them shot dead. So, coming out into the streets is really risky now. So most of that has stopped.
But it's interesting you talk about obviously the risk of being in the streets, but there's a lot that Maria Corina Machado has been doing from her hiding, really, because of electronic communication, including doing an interview with you as well, Christina. I just wonder how they're using technology really to keep the dream alive that she or her nominated candidate will lead Venezuela, even if that does seem a remote prospect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they are. She's speaking to people all the time, lots of international leaders, diplomats, people trying to keep support. And, what's perhaps special here, I mean, first of all, Venezuela, it has the world's largest oil reserves. So there's a lot of interest outside in Venezuela being a stable democracy, but also you've got this kind of nexus now of people supporting Nicolas Maduro. So, for example, Putin, you've got Iran, you've got Belarus, you have all these kind of almost like pariah states who are all perhaps wouldn't naturally be supporters of Maduro as a left-wing autocrat, and yet you've got things like the conservative clerical regime in Iran supporting him. But of course, what they all have in common is that they are very anti the West.
Yeah, and there is that lack of legitimacy in so many of them as well. Christina, thank you so much. That's Christina Lamb, the paper's Sunday Times' chief foreign correspondent, who's talking about that interview there. Fascinating. It's in the paper today on page 15. You can, of course, get it with your digital subscription as well at thetimes.com. An interview with Maria Corina Machado. Very few places where you'll read that, but Christina's got that in the Sunday Times today.